we have a quorum. Right. Starting off tonight, we're starting with public discussion. So I have a list of those already signed up. If you want to speak after this list is complete, please just raise your hand. We'll get to you. You can sign the list afterwards. Thank you so much. Public discussion will be limited to 2 minutes, and we'll let you know when you're getting close. We'll start with Miss Deborah Thomas.
Your backs. This feels a little weird.
You're welcome to stand up. Thanks, ma'am.
I came last week and I came tonight. There's been a lot of opponents of the high school who argue vehemently against the cost of the high school. The opponents of the plan are fond of referring to the bond referendum that was voted down in 2015. There were 8,324 registered voters at that time. Less than half of them showed up at the polls. And it was a 60% against to 40% for the bond. I dare say that the mobilization of the opposing side was much more motivated to keep the dual campus school from happening than the supportive parents were aware at the time that they actually needed to fight for something that was so obviously needed and that would be supported in our community. Nonetheless, it was a vote and it stood, which is why we're here. But for those who are fond of numbers, consider this. 87% of the voters in 2013 voted that Lakeland no longer needed to rely on Shelby County to educate its students. This after Shelby County grew by 100,000 students overnight when Memphis City decided it could no longer educate its children. I wonder that such a positive vote about educating our students in Lakeland has turned so negative when it comes to making it happen. Other opponents choose instead to extol the virtues of Arlington High School, and many of them haven't even sent their own kids to Arlington High School, opting instead to pay tuition to many of the excellent private schools in our area. While that is their prerogative, it does not preclude them from paying property taxes on their Lakeland homes, property taxes that are set aside for the education of our public school students. Nor does it give them the right to decide what is best for all of us parents who believe in the value of the public education and who already send our kids to the best public schools here in Lakeland every single morning. The one thing that some of these private schools have in common is something we're seeking for our own kids, a smaller school with local governance. Consider the examples of ECS, 900 to 1,000 kids in 13 grades. Christian Brothers, 850 to 900 kids in grades 9 through 12. And Briarcrest, 1,600 kids spread across 13 grades. We have a real chance to do right by our students here in Lakeland, to be good stewards of their educational growth. This has never been about the quality of the education at Arlington High School. This is about fulfilling an obligation to offer a complete public education experience, K through 12, in the city of Lakeland. Thanks for listening.
All right, next up is Julie Dingle.
Good evening. Thank you for thank you for allowing me the opportunity to speak this evening. I don't have a lovely prepared statement like Deborah has. She offered great information. I will simply say I am a huge proponent of education. I was a teacher, taught for 10 years, and the value of schools extends far beyond simply the educational component for the students themselves. All statistics point to the fact that towns grow when quality education is present. Lakeland needs a complete system. Both of my children are at Arlington High. I have a 10th grader and a senior. Neither one of them went to the middle school, and neither of them will attend high school. And my family supports both of those schools being built nonetheless. We see the value in terms of our property values. Those will continue to rise with a strong public system. And I dare say that we are running a great risk by not providing that for our community. If development occurs around us and we remain this isolated bubble, I fear for our own property values. The school board and the Board of Commissioners have done their steps in this process, and I encourage you to complete this for
All right, next up is Jim Ewan.
Nice job. I'm in the same situation she is. Both my kids are junior, senior at Arlington High School. They're not going to be in the school system here. One of them went to Lakeland Elementary for 5th grade only. I will tell you this, it's very important we have a high school in this city, and I will pay whatever I've got to do to make sure that happens because I know how important it is to the community. So I got you.
Jeff Beard.
Hey, good evening. My name's Jeff Bearden, live in Oakwood. I don't have your prepared remarks. Wasn't going to speak. I thought you was being here and show support enough, but I've heard some stuff, some doubt, and both sides of the fence tonight, so I thought I'd say a little bit, just real quick. So we moved to the Memphis area about 6 years ago, and when we found out we were coming here, I tried to live in Carterville. I really tried to live in Carterville. That's where my buddies work. That's where I wanted to go. Easy, it's set up. They've already got the great schools. They've got the infrastructure, the business development. It's all there. It's a package deal. I was also in the military reserves at the time, and my wife, as they do, tends to network, and she met some of the other military guys, similar to what Mrs. Smith was speaking about, and they talked us into Lakeland. What they talked us into Lakeland about was that, hey, look, this is a small town. People know each other, people watch out for each other, and right now there's just this little bitty school in these neighborhoods and there's nothing else. But what people are starting to talk about is they're going to be building these schools, and they're going to be building this community around these schools. And this little family out here in Lakeland that nobody knows about is going to grow to be this great, great community. And that's what kept us here, because we could have put the house on the market and moved to Carterville. They've announced this great big high school. They're all supportive of it. And we've watched this go from this little elementary school, which has been fantastic, to this middle school, which already is going off the charts. And we've got no reason to believe that the high school is not going to do the same thing. And I think you put the high school here, and it's going to keep other families like us that are going to hear about this town and see how it's growing, and they're going to want to be a part of it. And they're going to bring their families, and they're going to bring their businesses. And this place is going to continue to grow, and it's going to be something that we're all going to be proud to be part of. So, anyway, I decided to speak today. Thanks.
Anna Smith.
So I spoke with you here a minute ago. But the part I didn't tell you was, in 2013, my husband was stationed, was considered overseas, but it's in Toronto. And we were supposed to move to Norfolk. And at the last minute, his detailer gave us orders to Millington, Tennessee. I'd never heard of it. We're in the Navy. It's not near the ocean. It's a submarine. I cried. And I said, I'm not moving to the middle of nowhere, Tennessee. You'll go by yourself. And that can't actually happen, but those words were said, and I actually did cry. But we came here, and within a few weeks of the welcoming community and our great neighbors, we not only decided not to cry about the decision, but that this was going to be our home after he was out of the military. Just a couple hours ago, I was on Facebook, and one of my friends said, hey, we're getting stationed in Millington. Where do I live? And a couple of people said, oh, Arlington's good, and Lakeland's good. And of course, I chimed in and was like, no, this is where you want to live. This is the neighborhood you want to live in. This is where you're going to be enveloped. And then right after I posted that, there were 3 people that said, yep, I second Lakeland. Yep, I third Lakeland. And the main reason is the schools. And if you all don't choose to continue to invest in schools, no one will be here, and Lakeland will fizzle out.
All right, Lou Melton.
Everybody pretty much heard what I had to say in the previous meeting. This is 2017, and Lakeland's about to spend $60 million on high school, on bond. I didn't see a thing up there. Anybody see anything tonight? Anybody see any figures? You guys got the packets. I don't like that. I don't think it's right. It's bad enough that I don't get a vote. I would like for the town to come together. I'd like for the fight to end. I'd like to bring us progressively. Let's be like Germantown. Let's be like Carterville. Let's put it up on the board. Let's show the financing. Let's show the steps that we're going to do. and how it works. Not all this chit chat back and forth and somebody's reading off a chart and there's no data and no sources. That's not good. We're smarter, we're better than this. And I'm trusting that you guys vetted your packets before you make your vote today. Thank you.
All right, that's everyone that signed up. Is there anyone else that would like to speak? All right. As the VOC liaison here, Vice Mayor Roman, would like to say a few words?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Before you read the resolution into the record and get it properly on the floor, I would like to ask you to consider this resolution on behalf of Mayor Bunker and the Board of Commissioners. This resolution has been fully debated, fully deliberated on. It has been available to the public. We deliver it to you with a 5-0 unanimous vote by not only the Board of Commissioners, but also the school board. IDB, I ask you to pass this resolution.
And conclude our public discussion. Madam Recorder, it's the item.
Discussion and possible action on a resolution of the Board of Directors of the Industrial Development Board of the City of Lakeland, Tennessee, authorizing the issuance of not to exceed $60 million in aggregate principal amount of public improvement bonds, City of Lakeland School Project, for the purpose of funding the acquisition and construction of schools for and at the request of the City of Lakeland, and to enter into all other documents related to the foregoing.
Thank you, ma'am. Can I get a motion to get this on the floor?
So moved. I'm making a motion that we move this to the floor, please.
Second.
Second. All right, the item is properly on the floor. I think first up we'll have Mr. Bright, our attorney, make his presentation to tee it up.
Good afternoon or good evening. Getting the resolution in our packet today. I'm going to obviously the resolution. I'm going to walk through the resolution and the sort of documents that coincide with this transaction. It's one transaction in and of itself. Again, we've talked time and again at this board meeting about the IDB and its purpose. Purpose to, with respect to economic development within the city of Lakeland, Tennessee. In several of those meetings, it's been discussed, as each board member knows, or who's been in those meetings. So we have a couple of new board members with respect to how education impacts Lakeland and its economic development and growth within the community. As a part of that, the transaction before us is that the school system, Lakeland school system, will transfer its property to the IDB. That transfer will happen via a deed where the IDB will actually own the property in and of itself. The IDB will in turn lease that property to the city of Lakeland. And that's our IDB lease agreement in our packet today. That lease will have a rental amount, a rental fee. The rental fee is the bond payments in respect to this transaction. The resolution has that the amount of the bond will not exceed $60 million. As we talked through at a prior board meeting, we do not know what the exact amount of issuance will be, but the $60 million is essentially a ceiling. We expect it to be a lot lower, as you'll see from City Finance a little bit later tonight. So again, the school system transfers the property to the IDB. The IDB leases the property to the City of Lakeland. The City of Lakeland also has a prepayment option to, if they pay off the bond or the amount and the principal interest of the bonds, they can acquire the property back. And again, if you take that to year 15, the bond is a 30-year issuance. There will be that amount from that standpoint. If it's year 30, essentially it's zero because the bond has been paid off, the principal has been paid off. So that's that the city's obligation to do that from that standpoint. The City of Lakeland will then in turn lease that property to the school system. That amount, as you see from the lease agreement, is the nominal amount. Well, the school system essentially has the property from that standpoint. I mean, it has the leasehold interest in the property from that standpoint. IDB still owns the fee and simple title to give and the city's leases at the school system. The school system and the city of Lakeland and the IDB are in an interlocal agreement. The interlocal agreement will allow the school system to have control over the building of the high school in and of itself. Again, last week we did adopt certain bond policies with respect to debt management as well as compliance. And as we talk through if we go through a bond issuance transaction, whether it's this transaction or a separate transaction, we'll ensure that the amount of the bonds or the money is being utilized for the specific purpose that we're doing the transaction for. But again, we're allowing the school system to be in control. We'll essentially have that monitoring aspect of it, and we'll quarterly monitor it per our policy that we adopted last week. As we walk through that standpoint, we have the indentured trust document. That is our document with respect to the IDB and the underwriters with respect to the bonds in and of itself. That is, and our trustee. So again, that allows us to sort of our document with respect to what the transaction looks like, what's being stated in the transaction, and how the Lakeland IDB rights and obligations with respect to this transaction in and of itself. Also, there is a bond purchase agreement. Again, as the name states, with respect to how the underwriters with us are actually purchasing an obligation, and then we're making certain representations and warranties that we're organized, have the authority to do the transaction, separate and apart, the same way that the city of Lakeland and the other participants in this transaction go through this kind of standpoint. And then we have what's called a preliminary official statement, the POS. That is essentially our document and the city of Lakeland's document with respect to the financing, whereabouts to actually enter into this transaction. Obviously, as the Lakeland IDB knows, we are a conduit issuer. The city of Lakeland is utilizing, as we went through these documents, is putting up their authority with respect to their financial aspects to pay for this transaction. We would all know that our balance sheet up on the board, what the board would look like. So the city of Lakeland is using their obligation. As stated in the prior BOC meeting, I want to make sure we are understanding, we're not putting a mortgage on the property. So the city's putting up its good faith and effort to, with respect to its citizen credit to do the transaction. And again, they're obligated to us, vis-a-vis our lease agreement, to make those payments to be able to pay those bondholders off. And hopefully, the main standpoint to let them further.
To confirm this is not on. I think what I'm going to do is go over the affordability aspect. I brought up in the last minute, I think some of you are here for that, but I think it's an important question. I think some of you had that same question earlier. Can we afford it without a tax increase? And the answer is yes, and what was explained previously. I'll go over these numbers again. As you recall me talking earlier, we originally ran estimates at 4% and 4.5% over a 30-year period. And those came back, and that's where we based our initial affordability, and those things for review. They came back at 4% is $3.05 million annual debt service payment, and at 4.5% is $3.24 million annual debt service payment. So that's what we started looking at. If you go down to what does that mean in additional funding necessary from what we're paying now to what we would pay if we go through, respectively about $830,000 per year at the lower percentage, and just over $1 million at the 4.5%. I mentioned earlier, I got some revised number from Kyle today, this afternoon. What is the current rate as of today? And that rate is 3.507%. 3.507. So less than the the lowest estimate that we use in our initial figures. Now, the 3.5 could fluctuate, Cal could probably expand on that if you ask me. Of course, it's not locked in yet, but that's where it is as of today. Numbers based on the 3.5% would be a $2.81 million annual debt service payment. Which one more time? $2.81 million compared to 3.05 to 3.24, the 2.81. That'd be an increase in debt service requiring us to find the additional funds for approximately just under $600,000 per year. So the question is then where do we find that money? Where do we pull that money from out of the annual budget? This is something we look at annually out of the budget every year going in. We're going to bring forth the balanced budget. We've been directed and mandated that there will not be a tax increase associated, so how do we do it? And I previously said this a couple weeks ago and then again earlier tonight. There's 3 areas that we've presented. It's of course a Board of Commissioners decision where it pulled us from. These are the 3 areas that we brought forward. First of all, the road capital. I brought up some stats earlier tonight. The last 3 years we've had, I would call it historic spending, a level increase. From 2007 to 2015, going back historically, the average annual budgeted item is approximately $118,000 on roads total. So that's an average. The low number was just over $9,000 back in 2009. 2008 it was $284,000, but the average over those years, $118,000. Since that time in 2016, it was bumped up to $415,000. Last year in 2017, it was $1.15 million. And then this year, we currently have a budget at $900,000. So you can see the dramatic increase in spending on roads. What I was asked to look into is what that looked like if we dropped it back down to, what would be the impact on our roads budget if we dropped it back down to not the historical average, but a lesser number. Let's say we hit the target again, it depends on the annual budget, but let's say we dropped it to say $250,000, we could make up approximately $700,000 towards the high school to make that difference. Now, what does that mean as far as roads go? That's a big question. There's several different ways we maintain our roads. One, general maintenance is pothole filling. We do patches, some large, some small. We do crack sealing. We do bituminous overlays, which preserve roads in a good condition, make them last longer. And then beyond that, we have paving projects, full mill and overlay of an entire street. We haven't had one of those projects for many, many years until last year. We started milling and paving again. Here's examples around town where we did a full mill and overlay over several streets in certain neighborhoods. That would be the type of project that's impacted. Now, the cost of paving is extreme. You'd see one road or a collection of roads in a small area, not even an entire neighborhood, a small area between $700,000 to $800,000 for a single paving project. So that's what we'd be deferring if we cut that money out. We still continue with our patching, our crack sealing, our bituminous overlay, and everything else to maintain streets as we had in the past. But what I believe with further capacity than we've ever had before, as I think most of you know, the last probably year and a half, we've really built capacity at a staffing level and taken on more. We've increased personnel in public works, whereas before we've sort of flipped City Hall. We used to have a lot of administrators, not a lot of field workers. We have more in public works than we've ever had before. We've also purchased some equipment to make our job easier, like a hot box and roller, for example. We do our own patches without contacting the contractor. And I think we've been very responsive to those needs within neighborhoods when known. So we have a better capacity. So if we decrease it back down to 250,000, let's say, wherever that number ends up being, I think we do have a capacity to continue maintaining our roads as we have been without the major capital projects, capital paving projects. So that's one way, and that's a significant amount. Again, we could make up approximately $700,000 from that item alone. And again, if you're using today's interest rate, that would more than cover the $590,000 gap we have. If you go back to the 4.5, which at this point is probably unlikely, of 3.24, or I'm sorry, 1 million to make up, we still have a little ways to go. So let's move down to the next one. Existing variable rate debt. We have the ability to pay off some existing debt. We have increased cash flow in that alone, approximately $200,000 just from paying that off. That would add to approximately $700,000 from roads. And finally, again,
Mr. City Manager?
Yes.
Would you mind clarifying where that money comes from?
Sure. We would use reserve funds to pay off debt. So approximately $1 million in reserve funds to pay off that loan. That's the one we talked about earlier. It's from 2004. Still have 5 years left to pay off. A little over $1 million balance on it. We pay that off out of reserves. get rid of the debt service payment for that, would be about $200,000 per year.
Okay, thank you.
And then finally, again, looking at an annual basis, and so we do every year, of course, is look at capital projects. Now, there's room in the budget that, we don't have to get into each individual line item, but a big area is capital projects. We have certain big ones that come up. For the biggest one we have going on right now is probably New Canada Road, and it's progressing on various stages. We just completed a right-of-way acquisition, which was the cost of the city. Now, it's partially grant funded from the 80-20 federal grant split, but we still have a cost involved. We just finished a right-of-way acquisition recently. The next 2 years will be utility relocation. There'll be some cost involved in that. And finally, in about 2020, construction will start. There'll be a cost in that for the city. That one's rolling downhill. We're not going to change that. We're not going to defer that. That is what it is. But other projects that come up on a yearly basis, for example, one I've been using as an example today, we've been budgeting for or planning for like a new public works building. You've seen we have an old kind of metal building back there that we use. It's not ideal. It works for us, but at some point we're going to need a new public works building. That's the type of project. It's a I wouldn't call it a need yet. It's more of a want. We can defer that. We can get by with what we've had moving forward for some time. There's examples like that throughout our capital planning over the next few years. We can choose to defer or reevaluate our capital needs. So those are the main 3 areas to make up that gap. Again, this is something that we present a balanced budget to the Board of Commissioners every year, which we intend to do in the years coming up, and they decide what, make the hard funding choices of what actually into our budget. Any questions about that before Billy?
So just to clarify, to make sure that I'm 100% clear here, the money that we're currently paying, right, for the middle school, and if we cut back the road $600,000 where the bond rate says today, we would have more than enough to cover, without any sort of tax increases, the cost of the school.
Correct.
Or we could take $1 million out of our reserve, pay off the debt, and get $200,000 there, and potentially, and I'm not putting words into the the Board of Commissioners' mouth, but they could use that as well to then keep the road fund up if they decided to keep the road fund up.
That'd be their choice, correct.
Okay, thank you.
Another question, does this consider the Lake District at all?
It does not. It does not. This is assuming
Very
zero
conservative.
growth. That's correct.
Okay.
Based on today's numbers, today's budgeting items. That's correct. A Lake District would be nice, but we're not counting on it.
Jim, I had a conversation with you, but could you express how this additional project can impact any fees that are associated with utilities or whatever else we may experience? Like
As far as
opposed taxes, how it would impact any of our fees?
oh, sure. No, this does not include any fees. I know there's some discussion. The question was, would we look to increase fees elsewhere to help pay for this? And the answer is clearly no. Fees that are included are, like on say the MLG&W bill, those are for a specific purpose. As you know, we're trying to lower some of them. Fire fees being the big one. We're creating our fire department. The main reason to lower fire fees going forward. So fees would not be increased because of this project.
I realize there's 2 different types of expenses. One is going to be the cost of construction. The other cost is operating cost. I know that our school board has done a fantastic job keeping that at a net zero operating cost for the last few years. Is that expected to continue with the addition of a high school?
Yes, based on what Dr. Horrell has stated, that is correct. They're not looking for additional operating costs from the city.
The other question I had about construction, looking at some different variations in calculations and even experiencing moderate growth, there is a possibility that the school could exceed capacity, its planned capacity by 30 by the time the bond is actually over. Are there feasible options to build onto the site, or would we have to go to another site to accommodate that?
Sure. Now, based on Dr. Horrell's response, I know that question was asked of him. He said, yes, there are ways to build onto that school. It would not require a new school to be built. And that is part of the design and planning process, according to what he said.
One would have to assume, though, if you're growing like that, you're probably also growing your tax base, and thus you're going to have more general funds or operating funds to use as well. Is that true?
And
Just subject to,
Sure.
yeah, okay.
Have a couple more questions. Is this the best time to answer?
Yeah, sure.
Okay. It's my understanding that since the IDB will be taking on this debt, the city's financial ratings won't be affected. Is that?
Correct. We're assuming no negative impact to our ratings. We're going through a rating process right now, and that will be available shortly. I don't know the exact timeline on it, but yeah, we expect it to.
Could I get Al to revisit? Sorry, please. Chairman, is that okay? I was looking, because I was warned of liabilities assumed personally by members making decisions on this board. I see all sorts of captions and verbiage that protects, indemnifies, and limits liability on the IDB. We're a volunteer board. We were not elected into this position. So I'd like to get some clarity, and just for the record, on the liabilities that are incurred by the IDB on a group and as a personal member of the board.
So, as you said, there's various aspects in each document, essentially, that either limits liability, add cost for identification by another party, from that standpoint, that again, limits the corporation's liability, so to speak. Again, the IDB is a corporation. And again, there's always, any corporation within Tennessee, there's a Tennessee corporate shield, which again, does not guilt you to go sue. If there's a suit, pursue the corporation, because you're acting on behalf of the corporation, not on your individual behalf. From a personal standpoint, essentially, we can play what ifs all day, every day, but essentially, unless it's a fraud or an intentional misrepresentation with respect to any portion of this standpoint, that's when you risk a personal liability standpoint as well. As a comment was made earlier, and essentially our November 30th meeting, each member does have a fiduciary obligation, duty of care, duty of loyalty, with respect to the company, the corporation, so to speak, act as any reasonable person would act. From that standpoint, which again is a quote unquote sort of business judgment rule. That standpoint, but again, is we're all individual business owners. Owners who disagree, there are different sides to it, but as long as it's rational, again, there's no action from liability from that standpoint as well. And I do want to make sure that, from a record standpoint, I think I have talked to each and every one of you about this transaction as you've gone through the documents in and of itself. You have definitely done the work and looked at the various documents, aspects into it. As a lawyer, you're always proud to have a client that's reading the documents, to understand the documents, so to speak. And so, again, I can personally state, again, I just want to, as a personal record, we've talked through most of these documents and stuff, so I know that's why there's not a lot of questions, but again, we've gone through the standpoint to do your homework.
I'll be the first to say that anybody that knows me knows I'd be asking a million questions, and I've fortunately had the opportunity to reach out to financial professionals, city staff, legal counsel, proponents of both sides of this issue, and even Googled a lot of stuff, and was able to gain the information that I needed quickly, and I appreciate everyone that helped in that process.
One thing, Mr. Chairman, if you don't mind, I do want to introduce Kyle Wright, who's the PFM, the financial advisor to the city, as well as just, again, this transaction's been scrutinized by the city, we're actually able to do the transaction as well.
Hey, good evening, everyone. My name is Kyle Wright. I represent PFM, financial advisor to the city. And I just wanted to take an opportunity to tell the IDB that PFM has had an opportunity to structure these numbers, review it with the underwriting partners, and we feel fairly confident, very confident, that the numbers that we are putting forth are, number one, conservative, and number two, able to be achieved. I'd like to caveat that answer though by saying that all of our numbers are subject to market fluctuation, of course. So we've seen some wild swings in the market recently, as much as 10 basis points a day, which could have some impact on the numbers. Recently, it swung back positive in our favor, meaning rates have lowered in the last couple of days. So that's a positive for the city and for the IDB, the issuing authority of the bonds. But overall, PFM is confident that the numbers presented here to the board are fair and accurate, and we believe that this transaction will adequately reflect the documents that you guys have considered before you. Are there any questions?
Sure, Mr. Wright, thank you so much. I've got a question. Now, I heard your presentation to DOC earlier, and so I know this is kind of a repeat, but I just want you to, if you don't mind, to go through one more time the net impact, right, of the lease revenue line versus the general obligation.
Absolutely. So the difference between a lease revenue bond and a general obligation bond is about $1.3 million a year net savings if the city were to proceed with the IDB option as opposed to the GO option. There are costs associated with the IDB that you would not otherwise incur. So, for example, if you did pursue the GO option, there are costs. There are fewer costs than if you pursue the IDB option, and I'll spend some time talking about those costs. So for example, right now we're estimating about $500,000 worth of costs associated with the IDB transaction. That would be paid upfront at closing through bond proceeds. And if you were to pursue the GO option, we are estimating there's likely to be approximately $50,000 to $100,000 worth of costs that you would avoid were you to go that route. Additionally, there is a pricing penalty, quote unquote, associated with the IDB transaction. And essentially the pricing penalty stems from the fact that right now there's a lot of supply in the market, meaning there's a lot of issuers who are out there issuing bonds, and investors have a lot of options in regards to what they choose to spend their money on. The pricing penalty stems from the fact that an IDB issuance is a little atypical from an investor standpoint, but the way this particular transaction has been structured is structured in such a way to mirror a GO obligation. However, you have to have the time to adequately explain that to your investors, right? And given our compressed time window, and given the fact that investors have a broad breadth of other obligations that they could pursue, we do feel that there's going to be some pricing penalty associated with the IDB issuance. However, even if you consider the pricing penalty associated with the IDB and you consider the additional cost of issuance that otherwise wouldn't be incurred, we still feel that the cost of going through the IDB transaction is actually less overall when you consider the entire transaction than if you were to go through a GO issuance. And that number is about $46,000 on an annual basis, or if you were to aggregate it, approximately $1.3 million cheaper to pursue this IDB, even with the increased cost than going through the GO option.
Questions from Mr. Wright? Thank you so much.
Yes, sir.
Call back city manager for a moment, please. Sorry.
No problem.
Is it true that the city's financials are available on the city's website?
That is correct.
Okay.
Yes.
And that's where I went. And I found pretty much every bit of financial information I need, and the balance sheet as well. So, based upon that, can you share, just to your best recollection, where we stand today on the balance sheet?
Sure. I had actually, for Jessica, put her on the spot, our finance director, just
All right.
well.
All right. She has rather 2 meetings without it.
So, give me a moment. I'm going to give you a real-time number. It's the beauty of the cloud.
Amen.
which is new to us this year. We switched softwares this year, and I think it made all the difference in the world.
Apologies for the last minute inquiry here, I'm just curious.
Happy to answer. So for general fund equity, fund balance, we have an unassigned fund balance of $6.16 million. This is, for lack of a better term, our slow time of year. So this fund balance takes into account that we have not collected the majority of our property tax revenue for the year, which happens generally we collect in January and March to reflect December payments and February payments. So even without those revenues factored in, we have $6.16 million unassigned fund balance.
Based upon my experience and recollection of the city's financial situation, that's really good. And, you know, I wanted to just acknowledge that. I mean, this as a board, we're here to rate the creditworthiness of our potential, the city who are coming before us. And, you know, in studying the financials, I've seen a healthy balance sheet. I've seen very good things when you look at the financials. It's a well-run city, and I'm giving you guys kudos for that. So that's all I have as far as the balance sheet goes. Thank you.
I don't think that's good. Just for clarification, I think it's important to explain fund balance. Talk about unassigned fund balance and numbers. We hear numbers thrown around, like you explain unassigned and then what else?
Sure.
For key time in fund balance.
So unassigned fund balance is obviously anything that is not assigned to something else. So we have currently an assigned fund balance that is assigned to education, so it can only be used for educational endeavors. That is collectively the property tax that we collected in that first year when we were not making capital outlay note payments. And it's grown a little each year as we've set aside the 10-cent equivalent of property taxes for schools, and any local option that was left over. So that money doesn't just go into the general fund balance, it gets set aside for education. So we have an assigned to education fund balance of $2.62 million. And then we also have a committed fund balance for parks of $430,000. So when you look at our financial statements, our audited financial statements each year, you will get a total fund balance for the city, but there is a breakout of each of those things, and for the purposes of satisfying our general obligations, we have $6.6 million.
Make a comment if I may, Chair. I just want to just reiterate that we work with some of the best professionals in their field in the country. We're lucky enough to have these folks here in the region. We heard last week from Sean Massey. We've had Dexter Miller in front of us. We got Al Bright from Edge and from his lawyer firm down there. And now we've got Kyle in front of us presenting information. I've been involved in the city of Lakeland for 2 or 3 years, and sat on this board for a couple of them. And Jim Atkinson has always been very forthright and accurate with the information that I've asked for, and very quick to respond. Jessica's been there as well as Emily. I got to say that looking at the charter for the IDB, our responsibilities are to vet processes that bring development to the city. I'm not sure that me as a volunteer can look at the 2 elected boards that this community has put in place to make the decisions and look at 100% pro votes from the Board of Education and from the Board of Commission, and then sit here and not support what's in front of us today. So with that being said, I just want to voice that I'm going to have to support this item because the information that I've been able to glean, 211 pages of data that I, in my limited wisdom, have been able to go through, and I've asked a lot of people a lot of questions, and I've heard from those for the school, and I've heard from those against the school. To me, that's really not the item in front of the table here for this board. It's not pro or against school. It's have we dotted the i's and crossed the t's in the process that the 2 elected bodies have put in front of us today. And I'll have to say that I'll have to lean on the professionals that I've listed and that we've spoken with one at a time over the last several days. And the information has been prepared very professionally and put in front of us. I got to give kudos to the legal staff for the city because in just a short week or 2, they put together some very, very comprehensive documents for review by this board and for review for the Board of Commission and the Board of Education. So with that being said, Chair, I just want to say that I'm going to have to support this item given the data that I've been provided, and I think now is the time.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to call for the question.
If I may, just one moment, I'd like to just add what Maurice said here. I reviewed all these financials. I sit here and hear people tell me we have a fiduciary responsibility. The more I hear about potential savings, yes, we have a fiduciary responsibility, and it makes sense that we do it now. So for this, to me, in reviewing all the documents, the same documents you reviewed, listening to the professionals, listening to the city manager, I just strongly feel that it is the right thing to do. It's time to move Lakeland forward. It's time to put the bonds together and build a high school.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to call for the question.
Madam Recorder, could we do a roll call?
Mr. Acton.
Aye.
Mr. Brandon.
Aye.
Mr. Denmo.
Aye.
Mrs. Brown.
Aye.
Mr. Johnson.
Aye.
Mr. Purifoy.
Aye.
Chairman Laster.
Aye.
7 in favor.
Yeah,
0 against.
the vote passes unanimously. Madam Recorder, is there anything else on the agenda? All right, can I get a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Motion to adjourn.